Hi everyone. So we decided to do one of these again. So this is kind of like the second one of these kind of impromptu things that we've done. So we'll see how it goes. The first one seemed to be okay, so I thought, well, why not? Let's have another go. I think it's as far as I know, it's going out to 2 Facebook groups and my YouTube channel, and so that's the best place to interact with everybody as far as I'm aware. If everything's working, it's not quite the way that it's normally kind of set up. Now, I got a little thing to say before we start, really, and that's kind of like, people who know me, they know that I'm really into discussing movement issues. And you may also know that over the past 2, maybe 3 weeks, I've been sharing clips on Facebook about some of those issues. And so there's a number of questions that are raised for me. Like, I've always said that I think veganism is under attack. So I thought, well, maybe we ought to talk about, if that's true, what are the nature of those attacks? Is veganism as an idea no longer abolitionist in nature? And as we're about to see, because I'm going to play a few of the clips that I've put on Facebook, there are attempts at the moment to rewrite or rebrand. It's actually called rebranding veganism. And there's attempts to eliminate what's been perceived recently as the purity in the vegan definition and advocacy. And so I thought I'd bring all these clips together and just have a kind of chat about them and what they might mean to the vegan movement. And so for this, I'm joined by Ronnie Lee, and I'm also joined by Wendy. So welcome, everyone.
Hello, nice to see you.
Hiya.
Boom, boom, down there. Okay. So we can take it easy at the beginning because people, because it wasn't kind of advertised, so people will come in slowly, as it were. But if we pick up the theme about purity, it's interesting. There's a lot of people who seem to be confusing. Well, I think it's a confusion between moral consistency and purity. I think there's a lot of people who try to be morally consistent, but that is being kind of slagged off as a purity thing, as though you're trying to be perfect, and you're almost like having a go at us for not being perfect. So, I mean, is that part of your current? I mean, it goes back to the 80s, and certainly in terms of 1992, there was that famous thing in the Animals Agenda where you had Gary Francione, Tom Reagan taking the abolitionist line. Ingrid Newkirk was she said she's going into bat for welfare. And there she used that phrase then as well, we can't be purist about things, and now it's been translated to, oh, well, let's be pragmatic. And half the time it means, the way that it's panning out at the moment, it means don't be vegan. So I just thought we'd kind of chat about that. Is it part of your current understanding of what's going on?
Wendy. You can go first.
I think it depends how we define purist and in what context, because I think if we're trying to live as a vegan, then we do have to follow certain values and follow the philosophy as closely as we can and live by those values, as much as we can. I think that's different to someone new coming into the movement and being reprimanded if they make a mistake, or or they haven't quite managed to get rid of all of their skin clothing just yet because they're still kind of transitioning, or I think that wouldn't be my way. I would be pragmatic in that way, and that I'd encourage people along the way towards being as consistent as you can. And I think that's different to framing it like, oh, don't worry, just do what you can at any time, and it won't matter because you can be veganish and it doesn't really matter. I think that's different goals for me. I don't know if that makes sense. Just I think we've all messed up. We've all probably done things, and that we think we didn't know at the time. Like, actually, quite recently, something happened to me, and that someone made me this cup of herbal tea, and I thought it was the kind that I normally have, this ginger drink, and it actually had honey in it, and I didn't realize until after, and I was mortified, and I didn't even say anything to that person. I thought next time I'll just bring my own bag, but I was mortified that that was a mistake that I didn't, I wasn't even aware of, but I'm not going to beat myself up about that because there's nothing I could do about it. But yeah, I wouldn't then say, oh, but that's all right, I've had one, I might as well just carry on now. Next time, doesn't matter if she makes me another one, I won't say anything again. Next time I would say something, or I'd take my own bag. So I think purity and consistency and trying to keep doing the best you can is very different, but also helping other people along the way without being really stern and judgmental on them, but also encouraging them and to be consistent in their own values, and also just recognizing what those values are. That would be my take on it. I don't know if that makes sense. But
so you didn't beat yourself up, Wendy, but you didn't beat them up either and leave them in a pool of blood or anything. So,
I did consider it, but being a purist and all that. I took my purist whip with me, and
I think one of the things that's important to kind of ascertain is at what point does someone become vegan? What is necessary for someone to kind of be able to declare themselves a vegan? And I think it's the adoption of a philosophy of opposition to the exploitation of our fellow animals by humans. Now, I think veganism is a lot more than that, but I think that's the very minimum starting point for it. It has to be. And then from that, other things flow, because if you adopt that philosophy, then to live in accordance with that philosophy, that means that you do need to try to avoid involvement in that exploitation as best you can, really, because we live in an imperfect world where we have the exploitation of an oppression of our fellow animals all around us. And when you gave an example of that, where there was honey in a drink that you didn't know about, these things are prolific. They're everywhere. So it is very hard to be absolutist with avoidance of these things, simply because the nature of the world we live in, and that nature of the world isn't our fault. That's been created by other humans. It's
universally understood, though, isn't it, Ronnie?
Yeah.
We were talking before. I think you might have been going to get your drink, but Wendy was saying that it's not as though we say to people, "Oh, you're not perfect," whatever that means, so bugger off. I mean, who does that?
I don't really know anyone that does that, to be quite honest. And I think in these videos, 'cause I've seen some of them that you shared, it's almost that the person making the video has made something up that they can then attack, and what they've made up doesn't kind of really exist in the real world, or I've not really seen examples of it.
No, that's what I was saying. I don't hear anyone saying that, even on outreach or.
No, I think vegans are generally kind of fairly open and fairly caring and very, fairly kind of tolerant of people, because you think, these people have got potential, they're showing an interest and all that. So let me show you. I've got three just to start us off, I've got three clips. And this is from Instagram, and there's somebody who is talking and using phrases that you were talking about, Wendy, kind of like being perfect and this kind of stuff. And but she's got this mission to rebrand veganism. So let's have a look at that to start us off, as it were.
Day one of trying to fix the vegan brand so that we can win more for animals. I've been working for 25 years to end factory farming. And I think the biggest thing that's actually holding us back in giving farmed animals the life that they deserve, the life we all want them to have, is just the door people have to enter through. I want that door to invite everyone in. And at the moment, people feel like if they don't pass some kind of purity test, they're not good enough to be part of it. And I want to change that. And I'm going to try to change that. I'm going to try to look at real ways that we can do that. So follow me, and please send this to someone who thinks that this movement isn't for them because they're not vegan. And tell them they are. If they love animals, they are part of this movement, and we want them to be part of this movement. Right, Annie? Right, Annie?
Right, so there's a heck of a lot in there. Right from the start.
I've got a whole page of notes from that clip.
It's like that because there are so many. There's so many things to be said about that. I mean, we could probably do a whole show just on that particular video.
Just on that clip, yeah.
Because, but what she's talking about isn't the vegan movement. What she's talking about is the movement against factory farming.
Factory farming,
and of course, you don't need to be vegan to be opposed to factory farming, do you? You know, you could still be against factory farming without being a vegan. So, I'm not really sure how that's kind of relevant. I mean, I think that without veganism, without widespread veganism, we're not actually going to end factory farming anyway. So that's another important point, I would say.
Yeah, well, Compassion in World Farming are against factory farming, aren't they? And this new what's it called, Slingshot. That's it's interesting really because Geordie did a review. They put a video out called Gaslit, and it's about the gas chambers, and it's really quite interesting because Geordie put a review out today. It was and talking about the language they use, and they avoid talking about factory farming at all. They talk about animal agriculture and all kinds of different things, but then right at the end it takes you back to Slingshot, and the Slingshot thing is from David and Goliath, if you're wondering about the name, right? And they if you go back to their website, then the only thing they talk about is factory farming. So it's a little bit kind of weird in a way. There's no mention of veganism. You know, they shy away from veganism, and they also say, as part of their deal, that 85% of British alpha animals in Britain are factory farmed. It's higher in some other places. I think it's into the 90% in places like the USA. Now, it seems to me that if you focus on that and saying we're attacking the 85%, seems to be almost promoting the 15% that's left, it seems to me. But it is kind of weird the way that it was constructed. But let me go to this second one of this rebranding thing.
So a celebrity showed up in.
Yeah, sorry.
Just on that other clip, and actually someone here, Felix Cat, my vision's a bit blurry today. Farmed animals.
That one?
Oh, sorry, we did it at the same time. Sorry, I forgot I've got powers. You forgot I've got powers. Farmed animals don't deserve a better life on the farm. They deserve to live free from farming and exploitation. And that's something we don't really speak a lot about in the movement even. It's not that we want to free and liberate all those fellow animals and then rehome them all and they all live. You know, it's that we don't want to be breeding them into existence in the first place for us to use. And that's completely missed in that clip. And I think that in the movement, because people talk about liberation and rehoming and let's be kind and love these animals, but actually let's not breed them in the first place is a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another problem with what was said in the video is that, you know, we want these animals to have a lovely life. What a lovely life for a tiny fraction of their natural lifespan, at the end of which they're taken to the slaughterhouse. Is that what that person wants who made the video? Really?
It's hard to know, isn't it? Actually, there's a couple of comments that we could go to. First of all, Doug is saying that he didn't know he was being used in the Slingshot video. This is called Gaslit. It's about 15 minutes. It's got some graphic footage, but it's not the worst. You can see. Yeah, so there's that, and like I say, the language in it is very avoids factory farming, whereas their parent site, that's all they talk about, which is quite interesting. And then this one is interesting because this is really in terms of what I kind of set this up for, was the fact that maybe it does need a rebrand, as everybody still thinks veganism is a diet. Now the thing is, that I think is the rebrand, or one of them, that veganism is a diet, right?
It needs to be proclaimed for what it really is and what it always has been, you know, from what the founders intended it to be.
Yeah, well, if you take this list of 3 from Face Hater, hello, Face Hater. Oh, by the way, yeah, I was going to open this up as an open mic. I only just remembered, so I'll put the link in the thing when this next one's playing. I'll put the link in so people can join us if they want. Now, if you think about veganism as a diet, then you think about the environmental thing. If you think about reducing suffering, now 2 of those are the rebrands. Now, I think that if you read the pioneers, that they did have environmental concerns right from the beginning, but certainly in terms of it wasn't seen as a diet, apart from that kind of caveat that they had to prove that a plant-based diet was actually feasible in the early years. And the reducing animal suffering thing, that's really kind of come into the movement since like maybe the mid-70s onwards. They started working with compassionate world farming. People like Earthling Ed says that he rebrands veganism to mean the reduction of animal suffering. And he says that he just feels more comfortable talking about veganism in that way. So we're back to the problem that Leslie Cross talked about, which we're going to come back to, which is that everybody seems to have their own version of veganism. How can a social movement progress when that is the case, right? And so that's the kind of question.
Does anyone else have a problem with this whole rebranding at all? I don't even like the fact that we're calling it a brand, because it's so that just kind of associates it with consumerism and you know, that whole commodification, consumerism, capitalism.
Said, you know, I mean, like you know, obviously Chris Bryant is rebranding it. You know, Vegan 2.0. That's a rebrand. That's making veganism into animal welfare. You've got Leonard rebranding it. That's making veganism into vegetarianism, or actually into pescatarianism sometimes, because for some reason Leonard has got some real dislike of fishes. He's always on about eating fishes for some reason. So there's lots of it going on all over the place.
I think the talk about mention of fishes is important, because by far, you know, the animals that are, in terms of numbers, who are exploited most by humans are fishes and other sea animals. It's massively more than land animals, and the vast majority of those, although the farming of fishes is increasing, and that could be termed as factory farming, the vast majority of fishes are still caught in the ocean. And then you have other creatures, like when you talk about animals like shrimps, you know, crustaceans, it's an incredible number of those animals are killed every year. And so when we talk about, you know, the factory farming of land animals, that is really only a very small percentage of the total number of animals that are exploited and killed to feed humans.
Okay, it says that YouTube has rejected my link.
That's not very charitable of YouTube, is it?
No, but it's come up there as the vegan review. I think everybody can see that. So that's the link if you want to join the conversation. Should we go to this the next bit of rebranding from this same person on Instagram? Here we go for that one.
So a celebrity showed up in my recent comments who...
I'll go back to that celebrity.
So a celebrity showed up in my recent comments who has been fighting for animals for years, and she came under attack. Why did she come under attack? Because she said, I'm vegetarian and I get judged for that. And I want to say to her and to anyone like her, you are welcome here. The animals need you. You do not have to be perfect to care. You do not have to be vegan to be outraged by factory farming. You just have to give a damn. And if you do, you are welcome here. The animals need you and the movement needs you. In my research, I have been looking at movements throughout history that have gone to try to change some big systemic oppression like factory farming. And there are always a diverse group of people coming together, people who are more purist, people who are more reform oriented. They all work together. We need everyone to be part of this fight. Follow along. I will be sharing more insights from my research about how we build a movement powerful enough to end factory farming.
Yeah, it's very, very frustrating, this focus on factory farming.
Yeah.
You know, and then again, purity, you know, and it says you don't have to be vegan to be outraged by factory farming. Well, you could be outraged by factory farming if you're a vegetarian. As
you don't. I mean, where does this come from? You know, I don't know any vegans that say you have to be vegan to oppose factory farming, to be quite honest.
No.
But this is part of my bigger question, is what we've got at the moment is a lot of these people rebranding. They're actually, like I say, I mean, I think people like Tobias Leonhardt, I think he's probably a vegetarian more than a vegan. Even a pescatarian will see that. Now, the thing is, what we do know is they reject the tenets of veganism, because Leonhardt says that veganism is a diet, for example. There's a lot of people, Chris Bryant says veganism is a diet as well. So they're rejecting what veganism is. Now, my question is, because I'm baffled by this, generally baffled by this, if you don't agree with something, why do you want to call yourself that thing? It confuses the hell out of me. If you don't agree with veganism, why do you want to be called, you know, that your position is veganism? Because it's not, for a start. But why do it? It's kind of weird to me.
In that video, do you think she's talking more about the way that perhaps vegans attack vegetarians in terms of
well, I think that's
not being consistent and that kind of thing?
That shouldn't happen, right? You know, I think we've always said, although even Donald Watson called them the lactose, but I think that vegans legitimately can criticize vegetarianism, but that's different from attacking vegetarians. I think there's a difference there. You know, and so if she comes under attack, you know, she's saying that this celebrity joined and then came under attack. Well, I mean, that depends on the you know, exact details of what that means. But I mean, I would be opposed to attacking the person.
That's what they mean by attack. I mean, are things being termed as attacks when they're actually not attacks? When they're just someone having a conversation?
It might just be that there's a critique. It's the same way as you remember in Luxembourg when some people jumped up. Melanie Joy's husband, Sebastian, he was giving a talk in Luxembourg at the International Animal Rights Conference. At the time, he was the CEO of the German Vegetarian Society, and they were promoting a product which I think was made with 68% eggs in them, right? So some activists, in the kind of spirit of civil disobedience, they jumped on the stage, took the mic off him, and made a protest about him being there at an animal rights thing. And then Melanie Joy wrote an essay saying vegans shouldn't shame other vegans. And I wrote an essay in return saying that criticizing and shaming is not the same thing.
No.
You know, so if vegans want to critique vegetarianism, there's nothing wrong with that. Attacking vegetarians is a different thing.
But I don't understand what his problem is. You know, how
which one?
How difficult is it to live as a vegan?
What's your problem?
Why does he want to eat eggs and stuff? Why is he so desperate? to do that when it's like really easy to
it's because it
live
makes
as a
veganism
vegan.
look more normal, and it means it makes veganism easier, because he says if you've got a vegan movement full of vegetarians, it makes the vegan movement bigger.
But it's not the vegan movement.
It's not the
anymore,
vegan
is it?
movement.
Well,
It doesn't make sense.
Rebrand it. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's why they're rebranding it, to make vegan.
It's almost like going backwards. It's almost like the vegan pioneers pulled away from the vegetarian movement, and now it's like the vegetarian movement are trying to merge it all back together again. Well, it's not going to work like that.
Well, that's what I think. I mean, there's no shortage of names for their position. These people that are talking, because you've got pescatarian, you've got vegetarian. You can even call yourself, I'm an animal concern activist or something, whatever, animal age. I mean, you can call yourself all kinds of names, and it wouldn't be far-fetched to think that in certain things, the vegans and the vegetarians might form an alliance to do something.
Yeah.
Right. And that would be okay. But it's the fact that you've got people who are not vegan wanting to take over the movement because they want to be called vegan. And then the only way that they're comfortable with it is to change what veganism means.
Is it because they also feel that not necessarily that they want to be called vegan for not being vegan, but that they fear, like you were saying earlier about making it more normal, that they fear that other people, because of the, there's such a massive pushback against veganism, isn't there? It's like vegans are one of the most hated groups when research has been done. That we come up as quite a hated group, sadly, that people seeing veganism and hearing the vegan word, that other people are afraid to come into the movement in terms of, the movement in any way, shape or form to help our fellow animals. So there are, as we spoke about earlier, Compassion in World Farming, people in the RSPCA, people who do rescue. There are so many people involved in helping fellow animals in some way or another that are not necessarily vegan or even pushing for veganism. Are they the people they're kind of talking to in terms of come on board, help fellow animals, but you don't have to be vegan? Is it that? Because that's a different message to saying you can be vegan without actually being vegan. I think you can say you can help our fellow animals without being vegan. That's different, isn't it?
Well, this person in the clips, she can have her alliance of people who are against factory farming without having to rebrand veganism. Just leave the vegan part of it alone. And if vegans want to join that alliance, if they do so as vegans, along with whoever else is. But it doesn't mean that they all have to be called vegan, and therefore we need to rebrand veganism to fit everybody in. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. And of course, we're quite entitled, if we become involved in those campaigns. Of course, we're quite entitled to outreach other people within those campaigns who aren't vegan. We're quite entitled, and we should be educating those people about veganism. But obviously, that doesn't mean attacking them. And in fact, attacking those people would be counterproductive to what we were trying to do.
No, but
I think sometimes online in social media, there is a lot of toxicity online, as we know, on social media, where people perhaps get involved in these conversations that are not very productive or positive in any way, and it just becomes one attack after another. And I don't know if this thing, because I don't really get involved in all that stuff, but I don't know if this is what people are referring to when they talk about people being attacked or being purist or gatekeepers or whatever it is. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, the nature of an alliance, going back to what you were saying, Ronnie, is the fact that if you've got an alliance of different groups, they come together to forge that alliance. But the only way it can work is if each constituent part keeps its own claims making. And so, the vegans are not going to say to the vegetarians, but if a journalist asks me about, cow's milk and eggs, it's not as though I'm going to take your line. I'm going to take the vegan line. And they would just have to, as it were, put up with that in the same way as if the journalist asks the vegetarian something and they come out with their line, you know, the vegans would have to go, all right, well, that's the vegetarians talking, right? That would just be a bit of a compromise within the alliance, but it could be done.
Well, you'd speak on behalf of your own group, wouldn't you?
Of your own thing, yeah.
When you were, yeah.
And you reserve the right to have your own claims making.
Well, of course, yes.
Right.
Yeah, of course. I mean, our local vegan group, we're part of a local environmental alliance, which opens a lot of doors for us to have stalls at various events. Now, one of the other organisation alliances, like one of these kind of, what do they call it? Where they have farmed animals, and they regard that as being somehow environmentally friendly. Say, well, because we're part of that alliance doesn't mean that we have to go along with that and agree with that, because there's this other group in the alliance that is involved in animal farming. Does it? It doesn't, because you basically you have your own, you still have your own position, and neither is that insisted on.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's something about Chris Bright, I think, there. I think Chris says vegan diet or often animal-free diet. But a lot of vegans say that start acknowledging that veganism itself isn't a diet.
I think Chris does tend to take that line, though, doesn't he? That it's mostly about food. Like when you were chatting, or in another live stream that I saw, in a similar way to what Tobias says, they both have said that, don't they? It mostly is. It's mostly about a diet, isn't it? They've both said that, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, in terms of our fellow animal use, the overwhelming use of them is for food, but that is a separate thing to regarding veganism as being a diet. That's a separate issue. Mm-hmm. That's not the same thing at all. Yeah. So. Right, let's do number 3 then.
By a crazy thing on my run. There was a vegan
I'm going to start that.
I just passed by a crazy thing on my run. There was a vegan restaurant that was checking people's vegan credentials before they allowed anybody into the restaurant. So there was a group that had some vegans and some non-vegans, and this vegan was really excited to share the restaurant with their non-vegan friends, but they said, no, you're not vegan, you can't come in. Okay, that didn't happen, but that is essentially how our movement is working right now. The movement to help animals, the movement to end factory farming. We need to create a movement that invites everyone to the table, one table that we all share, where we are enjoying working together to end factory farming. You do not have to be vegan to be outraged by factory farming. You just have to give a damn. You just have to want to sit at the table, and we want everyone to sit at the table, because we can't do it without everybody.
I put a comment saying this is really childish, that she actually sets up this thing which wasn't true in order to have a go. But okay, so want everybody at the table, but they don't all have to be called vegans, do they?
But the rest of it isn't true either. She's saying that I don't know of any campaign against factory farming that says that you have to be vegan to become involved in that campaign.
No.
I'm not aware of that. Where does that come from?
No idea. I know some campaigns like Viva, they will say end factory farming, go vegan, but that's a different message, isn't it? That's not saying in order to campaign, you've got to be vegan. They're just saying end factory farming, go vegan in order to end it. So I don't know where it comes from.
I think because I think it would, how likely it would be that non-vegans would be involved in Viva campaigns, I don't know, because although they tend to lead with factory farming, the go vegan message tends to be included in everything they produce. So but that's different than campaigns that are specifically against factory farming, because with those you would be talking about organizations like Compassion and Will Farming. And what was that other group, the one we had a discussion with a couple of them, didn't we, Roger? What was that?
Is it CAF?
No, it was scrap factory farming.
Scrap factory farming. There was a they didn't. They certainly didn't insist that members of their campaign had to be vegan. I think the people that ran it, I think most of them were vegan, but they weren't insisting that you've got to be vegan before you can join this campaign.
No, it's a puzzling thing. The bottom line for me is I just cannot understand why somebody who doesn't agree with veganism wants to be called a vegan. It doesn't make any sense to me.
No.
It seems a bit weird. And then the only way that they can be vegan is to change what veganism is. So it's a bizarre little construct that's going on here.
This person isn't saying that they don't agree with veganism, though, are they? This person you've just shown, I don't think. I don't remember her saying that.
No, not this particular one, but
not
certainly
this one.
when you get to Leonard, because he says it's a new movement. It's about food, and he also says things like go easy on certain words. One of them of which is veganism, and he said the other one is animal rights, and then the other one is speciesism. Because he's always got this two-phase model that he talks about, and he says we're in a pre-vegan phase. And then how long is the pre-vegan phase going to be? He said 10 or 20 years. Sometimes, when he first started doing this, which was about 10 years ago, he was saying 30 years. That really the best thing to do is not really mention veganism too much for 30 years, right?
But let's transfer this to other forms of oppression and exploitation. Say racism. Maybe we should be in a pre-racism phase where it's okay to exploit and oppress, people of colour in some ways. And let's not mention, we won't use the word racism, shall we, as part of that? Because it's exactly the same, isn't it? Why is there this differentiation when it comes to the oppression and exploitation of our fellow animals?
No, I think
it's so ubiquitous, isn't it? It's so socially normalized. And
but you see but that's going to remain the case until it's challenged at a fundamental level, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're avoiding, we need to speak the truth. We need to speak the truth loudly, and we need to speak the truth also gently, I think. But I think you can put across radical ideas in a very gentle way, and in a way that people will understand and people will accept.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think maybe a lot of these people that want to water down the meaning of veganism don't believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same as if you transfer it to the feminist movement. You wouldn't be saying those kind of things either. Oh, well, let's just not talk about domestic violence just yet because it's a little bit on the touchy side. Let's deal with that 30 years down the line. Let's just deal with some low-hanging fruit right now. Let's it's And I'm asking the people who actually who really want to end this oppression to dilute their own message and therefore their own values. Like, if people who have these values very strongly and feel so passionately about this message don't bloody say this message, then who's going to say it? Like, if the people who are really, who really believe it so strongly in their bones,
It's the emperor's got no clothes syndrome, isn't it? Nobody must say, the story of the emperor that had no.
Oh yeah.
And everyone was frightened to say that, and then a little boy or a young child said the emperor's got no clothes because there was an emperor that was naked and nobody wanted to say. It's like that, isn't it? That
this horrible mental image of Trump with no clothes on now.
Horrible naked emperor. Yeah, that's kind of was nobody,
That could give us nightmares for weeks, that, couldn't it?
Yeah, well, yes. Get a vision of Donald Trump, don't you, somehow?
Yeah, that's going to put us off our dinner, that is, isn't it? Oh.
Yeah.
But it is that, isn't it? No one wants to tell the truth about it. Well, not nobody. Yeah, there are those of us that do, but it seems a lot of people don't want to say it
think
like
in general,
it is.
you know, you were talking about, well, the racism thing and the speciesism thing. It used to be what you were saying, when it used to be that people saying, oh yeah, but you know, speciesism is everywhere, whereas everybody's against racism. But yeah, it's weird now because, I mean, I think we've found with reform in Britain and with Trump in, you know, in the USA, there's a hell of a lot of it still around.
Yeah, the reason we got Brexit is racism. That was fundamentally racist. It was that was what won that vote. You know, was racism. You know, people didn't want others from, you know, the people from other countries coming to live in the UK. That was why they voted for. That was the prime reason most people voted for Brexit. Racism.
Yeah, and it's all gone so swimmingly well as well.
Yeah, really well. Yeah.
Amazing.
Doug brings up that point. It's kind of a bit off track,
Yeah.
but it brings up that point about the vegans. You know, I did notice that the Facebook group, Vegans for Trump, I think that seems to have dwindled now. It's not as big as it used to be. So I don't know whether that's getting to it.
Perhaps they're catching on.
No, I've got some historical stuff just to put a little bit of context in. I'm not going to read these out. I'm just going to give you a kind of flavor of what's going on now. And this taps into what we've talked about so far. So first of all, this is Leslie Cross, and he's writing in 1949. Now, Leslie Cross famously, you know, the movement started, or the social movement started in 44. So 5 years later, he goes, we don't have a definition. And he said that it didn't matter for the first 5 years, but we can't go on like this. And he says this, where it says one and the other in bold. He says, we've got two roads ahead of us. One is that everybody can define veganism as they want, right? And the other is that we need a clear, precise definition, which everybody who joins the vegan movement will agree with. So they came down on the second idea. The ironic thing is we're back to this thing that Cross warned us about, because everybody just seems, I mean, you see that on Facebook all the time. You know, in my version of veganism, you know, well, veganism to me is, you know, and people just have their own personal version of what veganism is. It's as though they're not in a social movement. There's all these isolated individuals who call themselves vegans, which is quite interesting. And so he said, well, look, you know, this can't go on, because he said earlier than this, he said, we can't just have everybody saying what veganism is, right? And then another problem, I think, I alluded to that when I started, was the fact that the bit about veganism being abolitionist seems to have gone now, or been again under threat, because this is 51 and he was moving towards 54, where he has his final philosophical essay, The Surge of Freedom. He says, in this light, veganism is not so much welfare as liberation for the creatures and the heart of the mind and heart of humanity. Not so much an effort to, now that's a typo in the original document, effort to make the present relationship bearable, as an uncompromising recognition that because it is in the main, this relationship being one of master and slave, it has to be abolished. Something else has to be built in its stead, and you know, that's the kind of language that think. But you see, now we've even got a rebrand trying to make veganism associated very strongly with animal welfare. You know, there was always a bit of ambiguity in the 60s and 70s, maybe into the 80s. Now there's one type of rebranding, you know, vegan 2.0, which is basically saying to vegans, the best thing you can do is not necessarily stand on the street with your leaflets. The best thing to do is give your money to the animal charity evaluators, and they'll transfer your money to an animal welfare charity, right? And that's the very best thing you can do. So it's all part of the effective altruism thing. right? And so now effective altruism has kind of been used to reshape veganism as well as everything else, right?
You know, you were saying about the whole individualism. Everyone's defining their own veganism their own way as an individual. It reminds me of, you know, stuff and issues that are going on within the feminist movement as well, because this is a complaint also within the feminist movement, in that, you know, radical feminists will talk about structural feminism, and, you know, they are particular about they are gender critical and the oppression of women as a sex class kind of thing. So this is the radical feminist theory, whereas now there's a whole new kind of version of feminism, which is much more individual, where women will do, you know, for example, even like the PETA stuff, where women might be out dressed,
empowering,
not dressed, scantily dressed, in a provocative way or a commodified sexual way, and they'll say, yeah, but this is my body and it's my, you know, I'm empowered to do this. Whereas radical feminists would say, yeah, but it's not about individuals, it's about structural change and systemic oppression. And it's kind of in a similar vein here, isn't it? In that we're getting that, you know, veganism from the origins and the pioneers is about changing society and structural oppression and systemic, and changing our fundamental relationship with our fellow animals. It's not about, how do I feel like showing up as a vegan today? What does it mean to me today? It's less about individuals and what it means structurally. How do we change the world?
Does that mean that what's going on in our movement is what goes on everywhere over time? For example, is there a rebranding of the Labour Party? Is there been a rebranding of the Green Party? Has there been a rebranding of feminism? Now, I think it's
happening, yeah. And and it brings me to a question, actually, that I'd like us to maybe think about as we're thinking about all of this, is if things can't stay the same, and they can't, because life changes, things move on, we're no longer in the same landscape as the pioneers were back in the 1940s. You know, it's a different world now. Technology has changed. The world has changed quite dramatically, even since COVID, probably. How can veganism evolve without staying stuck, but without losing its values and diluting the message? How I don't know. I suppose it's worth thinking about, isn't it? How can it evolve? Well, who decides?
Maybe it has evolved. I mean, if we assume that if you go up to most vegans, they might say, I mean, I don't know, I don't have any figures, but most vegans now, most people who self-identify as vegans might very well say that veganism is a diet. Now, if most vegans say that veganism is a diet, doesn't that mean that veganism is a diet now?
I'd say no, because veganism will always remain as it was intended to be by those who defined it.
No, but that's what Wendy's saying. Things evolve and move on.
Yeah. Yeah, but it still is what it is, isn't it? That's what I'd say. Even if the majority of people get it wrong as to what it is, that means they've got it wrong, doesn't it? It doesn't mean that veganism has changed. What veganism means has changed.
Well, the majority, if the majority rules, then they've got it right, and we've got it wrong, Ronnie.
Well, they'll think they've got it right, and we'll say we've got it right, won't we? But I say to them, well, why are you? What do you look to when you come up with your own definition of veganism?
With your nonsense.
Because otherwise, someone could, like, you know, be eating a steak and claim to be vegan, you know, create their own definition of veganism, you know. Obviously you can't do that. There has to be some basis for, you know, for the definition. That's what I'd say. You know, if someone said to me it's just a diet, then I'd say, well, on what basis have you decided that? You know, where's that come from?
Yeah, who told you that type of thing?
Who told you that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Roger, are you showing the clip? I'm not sure if you were showing it from Wayne. from what he was saying the other day about if you're active for fellow animals, you're more of a vegan than if you're a vegan who's not active.
No, I don't actually. I don't have that.
Oh, okay.
Unless I've got it somewhere. I think it might be on my phone actually.
That was in it. But I mean, Wendy's summed it up really. He summed up what he said, and I said, well, look, Wayne doesn't understand. The first thing to be said about that is Wayne doesn't understand what veganism is. If you see, because he's saying if you're not vegan, but you're an activist, you're more vegan than a vegan that's not an activist. But in actual fact, you're not vegan. You're not vegan, are you? If you if you're involved in,
for people who don't know what we talk about, this is Wayne Sean, right? And he put out like an Instagram or something where he said that because he put the years ago he put that essay out saying forget veganism, right? And so he's always said that veganism shouldn't be the moral baseline. Activism should, which a lot of people at Camp Beagle would agree with that.
Well, I mean, but shouldn't we, before going out to try and tell other people what to do, shouldn't we be looking at what we do? Like you're going outside a place that exploits animals, uses animals for experimentation, or sends animals to laboratories, and you're shouting at the people in there about how cruel and terrible they are and everything, while at the same time you yourself are paying other people to kill. Well, the average for someone in the UK that consumes animal products is basically they're paying other people to kill about 100 animals every year. So you're not on any kind of firm ground to be telling other people what to do, are you? This is the problem. Don't you sort yourself out first before trying to, tell other people what they shouldn't be doing?
But then doesn't that feed back into the whole purity thing, like you're gatekeeping because they're not vegan and therefore they're not welcome?
Well, I don't think anyone's saying that people can't go to Camp Beagle or can't protest against vivisection if they're not vegan. I think it's kind of good that they do, and one of the reasons for that is because it's a pathway to veganism. A lot of people that have gone to Camp Beagle,
a lot of people,
become vegan. I'd say no, you can't. And that's similar to the factory farming thing, isn't it? Where you don't have, you can be involved in the movement against factory farming without being vegan. You can be involved in the movement against vivisection without being vegan. But that doesn't mean your position is consistent, does it? That rings true for me. When I was when I first came into the movement as a teenager, I was involved heavily in.
What about 3 months ago? Was it, Wendy?
Just a few little months. But I came in exactly that way through a stall showing horrific images of fellow animals in laboratories, etc. And that's how my introduction to activism. But I was already a vegetarian from being quite young, because I'd rejected the fact that I didn't want to consume fellow animals. Once I realized that I was consuming a person on my plate, that stopped. But it took me a while to get to veganism because I didn't understand veganism. It wasn't in my world. So I was an activist vegetarian, really, but I would never have called myself vegan. I wouldn't go back and go, oh, well, really, I was a vegan because I was doing everything I possibly could do, and I was active for fellow animals. So therefore I was vegan. I would never say that. Even now, I wouldn't think like that. I think I was vegan in the waiting, because it's when I embraced the philosophy and understood the relationship. That's when I think I would say I became vegan, and then was consistent about my behaviors as well, like not consuming.
Wouldn't it be so wonderful if the people who understood what veganism is were the ones who advocated for veganism, and the people who reject veganism don't call themselves vegans? See, this is an exact mirror of what happened between animal rights and animal welfare. They ended up that all the animal welfarists wanted to be called animal rights. And so they made animal rights into animal welfare. So this is what's happening now. You've got veganism being made into vegetarian or something else, but they still want to call it vegan, and they want to personally call themselves vegan, even though they've rejected. See, there's a couple of things here. This is interesting, actually. The 88 definition. So this is 1979 to 88 definition. So this is the one that is now regarded as the official definition. You know, the practicable and possible one and all that, right? Now, so Vegan Anthem is saying that should be rejected to go back to the 1949 definition. And this is from Leslie Cross, okay? Now, the only thing I would say that is that this is not the definition of veganism. This is the definition of the focus of veganism. But it definitely is the focus of veganism. And so when I agreed to do the discussion with Chris Bryant, I was saying that we could frame it with the fact that we're both critical of the 79 to 88 Vegan Society definition. But he wants to go forward to vegan 2.0 or 2.0, I think I've got to say. He took the piss out of me saying 2.0 for some reason. And he wanted to go forward and make veganism animal welfareism. I wanted to go back to the stronger previous definitions, you know, and so I wasn't trying to change veganism. I was trying to revert back to the stronger previous definitions of it, which I think is a fair thing to do because they're there. We're not making anything fresh up. It's they're there already, and it was changed by when the Vegan Society moderated and everything. You know, the Corey Lee Wren stuff about social movements moderating when they professionalize and stuff like that. Now, we know that's a process they go through, but it would be interesting to see whether there will be enough vegans who want to go back to the stronger definitions of veganism than that 88, 79, 88 one, you know?
I think a lot of people who identify as vegans aren't aware of that definition from Leslie Cross at all, and I think that's one of the problems.
I think it's worse than that, Ronnie. At the moment,
They don't care.
no.
Yeah, there is that.
It's not that. It's because some people have taken a single sentence out of Cross and said this is veganism, full stop, without, you know, they're not very nuanced about it. They're not very contextualized about it. So now people on live streams are taking the piss out of Leslie Cross. I see it all the time. Oh, Leslie Cross kind of thing. They're kind of taking the mickey out of Leslie Cross, right? Because of what some people have done with that one sentence, right? So it's a real shame to me to see Leslie Cross being abused because other people have extracted one sentence out of 6 essays, you know, and the 6 essays were, I mean, he was a journalist, you know, they weren't soundbite essays. You know, they were compositions kind of thing, you know. And, you know, I've always argued that if you're going to understand Leslie Cross, you've got to read the full essays in order to get all of it. You know, extracting sentences out doesn't work for me. Right, let me show you this. We're gonna move to this is still part of this. This is still part of this historical thing. Now, this goes back to 1945. Now, let me explain what's on the screen, and I'll just point out the relevant bits. The bit that I've written in, where you can actually see it, one of our critics, that's what's said in the very top bit. But because you couldn't see it, I thought I'd type that bit out, and there is a typo in this as well. It says, one of our critics informs us that reforms we advocate is so very difficult. The cow, too, must not find it easy when her successive calves are taken away from her, but she can do nothing about it. We can. Then he says, regarding difficulties, we might remember the words of Philip Brooks. We do not pray for easier lives, we pray to be stronger humans. And then Watson says, reformers who find it difficult to stand alone in a world of moral and physical decay, which is what the pioneers of the movement saw the world as, that we're in a moral trough and all that. So moral and physical decay can hardly have the strength of conviction, and they would be do well to keep silent until their opinions have matured. So that was Watson being a bit tough on people, right? How it worked out within the vegan social movement as it was evolving, and we're only into 1 or 2 years in, is they realized, how are we gonna allow for associate members? And so they started to try and work through that, right? And he said, it is necessary to decide whether to include as members those who practice veganism with occasional lapses, or to confine membership rigidly in accordance with the proposed rule. The latter has been chosen. So the tougher thing was chosen by the existing members of the Vegan Society then. And he said, we can't have members who are strict between meals. Watson had quite a good sense of humor, right? And so even right early on, this kind of issue, which I suppose was, they tried to incorporate that within that phrase, practicable and possible. They tried to give some kind of leeway, And going back to what you very first said, Ronnie, when does somebody become vegan? If somebody becomes vegan when they adhere to the philosophy of veganism, but they can't, for a variety of reasons, manage the dietary expectations, are they still vegan? That's an interesting conversation in itself, seems to me.
Yes, I think it depends on whether or not they're doing their best in the circumstances they're in to live according to that. There was the case.
Couldn't you just say that I'm an aspiring vegan if that was the case? You could say.
Well, the thing is that you can't. I think it's say the use of animal products in our everyday life. I'd say it may be absolutely impossible to totally avoid it because animal products are in so many things, and I think it's easy to avoid them in food, but they're in so many. Like they're in the tires, many car tires, and in all sorts of other things. We wouldn't think that they were even there. It's and I'm still finding out about stuff that animal products are in that I'd never thought would have been in those things. So there kind of is that, and all you can do is like your best to to avoid those things.
Well, I'm going back to what Wendy just said. Have a think about this. Say there's somebody identifying as a vegan who is consuming a strict plant-based diet that has no understanding of the philosophy of veganism, compared with somebody who has a good understanding of the philosophy but can't make the dietary requirements. That is a really kind of weird, interesting argument, isn't it?
It is, but I'd say the philosophy comes first, and the dietary requirements are a very important part of the philosophy. Because say, for instance, going back to racism, say part of the exploitation of people of other races and ethnicities was that, was the consumption of their bodies. Say those people were farmed or were captured and were eaten, by the kind of, the exploited race that were the exploiters. Somebody who identified as an anti-racist, surely the first thing they would do would be to stop consuming those products that contain parts of the bodies of those of those people. Isn't that the first thing that you'd do?
Yeah, unless they couldn't.
Well, if they could,
that's the relationship that you mostly have, isn't it, with fellow animals? Definitely on a daily basis.
Yeah.
That is the relationship that you will be experiencing every day.
Yeah, the philosophy comes first, and then you're doing your utmost to live according to that philosophy. But that depends on your circumstance. There was the case of a guy that was held captive and denied a vegan diet, wasn't there? And you know, we had a little discussion about was that guy still vegan?
Oh, yeah, we did, didn't we?
I think Roger and I did. I mean, I'd say yes. Yes, if that the only thing that the only way that guy, the only food that guy was provided with was non-vegan food.
But it sets up that dichotomy, doesn't it? So you've got a vegan who's not plant-based. Oh, you've got plant-based people who are not vegan.
Yeah, you have people that will kind of go to the ultimate lengths to avoid anything that contains animal products, but they still don't understand the actual the philosophy. I think in terms of it being wider than just about food.
But those people, are they the ones that people are really thinking about when they say purists? You know, the ones who take it. I mean, like there was that thing, wasn't there, on I think there was a thing on World Day or something that somebody kind of went around and took everybody's drinks off them and poured them away because they had sugar in them and stuff. And it was, you know, back in like 1982 when there was all that stuff about the Mars bars and, you know, the experiments.
I think it's because there was some sugar that was refined using bone charcoal, and so therefore wasn't regarded as being vegan. I wonder if that might have been a reason for it. Certain brands of sugar. I don't know whether that's still the case. It was at one time.
I think it might be in the States, but not here, as far as I know.
Yeah, I'm not aware of it happening here. Not now.
It used to be that because there was those brands, wasn't there? You know, like you remember the sugar brands? There's one that you had to avoid.
Yeah. You don't hear about that now, so maybe that's not a problem.
Do you remember that, Wendy?
It's ringing a bell, but I can't really remember it or the brand.
I think it had like a night. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, I don't suppose. But I mean, going back to the kind of, as it were, you see, this is where I get the idea of people who are trying to be morally consistent. I'd say that those are the people who are going to some length in order to fulfill what they regard as being morally consistent as a vegan. Now, it's those people who are often being called purist. And people are saying, well, you're making veganism look hard, you're making it look difficult. And so now there's this move, and here's the first clip on that. There's a move where there's moves to bring flexibility into veganism, right? So you've got
some degree of flexibility. I'm not saying systematically eating fish, but allowed for a few exceptions. If we would say like that, veganism meant that 2 times a year, I'm just inventing something, you could eat non-vegan stuff, and you still could call yourself a vegan. Is it possible that for a lot of people it would be a lot more attractive? You know this example of like a person saying like I could go vegan, but this rabbit at Christmas with my grandmother just once a year, I just couldn't miss it. They liked the taste, or they couldn't stop eating it for their grandmother, not to hurt their grandmother or something.
Right, so there's a million things in that clip.
There is, yeah. But going back to what I said about racism, say replace that, you know, replace the flesh of the rabbit with the flesh of humans of an oppressed race.
I was so angry, Ronnie, when I first heard him go, this rabbit. You know, I could go vegan, but there's this rabbit. I couldn't not eat this rabbit. And I was thinking, fucking hell, you know, because I think that what's going on a lot of the time is a lot of modern vegans, you know, bringing in kind of Amelia Lee's book, Think Like a Vegan. I don't think a lot of people think like vegans anymore. Tobias Leonhardt certainly doesn't. With that symbiosis thing, and Wendy can tell you all about that, the guy thinks more like a free-range farmer than a vegan. Doesn't think like a vegan.
Yeah, because that is totally what we was talking about. When you're a vegan, you've changed your fundamental relationship with fellow animals from one of dominance, tyranny, exploitation, oppression to one of solidarity, respect, etc., justice. That doesn't fit. That does not fit what he's saying there. Like, oh, but I can just twice a year make an exception. What does that tell you about how you feel about those individuals that you're going to consume? It tells you feel that they are there for you to consume. That's not a different relationship. That's the same relationship of oppression and exploitation. And that's the fundamental thing that we need to change, is that relationship. It doesn't make sense to me.
Just gently tell, was it the grandmother he referred to? Just gently tell your grandmother why you're not going to eat the rabbit.
No, you can't. You can't do that. You can't do. According to him, it's not possible for vegans to do it. They kind of construct vegans as having kind of no social skills. There's a clip coming up which illustrates that directly, that we don't have any social skills, so it's impossible. See, what Leonard did was he rehearsed all these ideas that became his blog and then became his book in a group called AR Zone, right? And he was in that group, and I was in it. Carolyn Bailey was running it from Australia. And he was rehearsing all these ideas. Do you think vegans can go to a strip club? If I gave you 10,000 euros or dollars, would you eat a steak? He was rehearsing all these ideas, right? And that ended up in his blog, and then it ended up in his book, right? And
why?
What?
Why?
Why what?
Yeah. Why does he say all these things?
Well, because he wants to make veganism easier. He says that people like me, because he's got a blog entry called an activist called Roger Yates or something.
Some bloke called Roger.
Because I did an audio debate with him once. I've still got the clip. He started swearing at me.
You've got to dig that out. I'd love to hear that.
I was reading out his slide from one of his own videos, and he started swearing at me, saying that I was misrepresenting him and stuff. But anyway, it's all very weird. It goes back to that thing about, if somebody who kind of feels that not offending their grandmother is more important than rights violations against a rabbit, well, they're not thinking like a vegan, are they?
No.
Well, no.
And also, you're a vegetarian. You're a pescatarian.
And you're not forced to go to the meal with it was forcing you to go to the meal with the grandmother anyway. You know what I mean?
Well, that's part of the construction. The thing about if you're not able to be what I now call a normie, and you accept invitations and all that, and then if they mess this up, Peter Singer says exactly the same. If they mess it up and you end up with a bit of cheese or a bit of egg in mayonnaise, the best thing to do is eat it, because it won't be possible to politely explain to your host that, oh no, well, this is not my scene, man. It's not possible to do that without upsetting them, to the extent that they'll be alienated from veganism for life, he says. Because we don't have the social skills to explain our moral decisions.
Can I just ask, because I've just realised what time it is and I'm way over my duties time. Are you staying on? I can disappear and come back, or I can just... Are you staying?
I was sat here deliberately not telling you.
I don't know. Have we got much more to cover? Have we got any more clips or?
Oh yeah, plenty of clips. Don't worry. Unless you want to go, Ronnie, do you?
No. I was just thinking about Wendy. No.
But Brian's probably upstairs going, "Oi, human."
Well, you're well over your 30 minutes anyway, Wendy. So I know. I'm very grateful for you to coming on in the first place. So.
Oh no! I should go, and I might hang around. I might hang around and just take myself off, and then if you're still around when I've done, I'll jump back in and get them. But I'll just mute myself and stuff.
Right. Okay. Well,
Duty calls.
Say hello to Dylan.
I will say hello to Dylan.
I used to love Dylan in the Magic Roundabout. Do you remember Dylan in the Magic Roundabout?
I do remember Dylan in the Magic Roundabout. Yes, I am that old. Yes,
indeed. Right.
I remember when the Magic Roundabout started.
Oh dear,
Remember
I
the
don't
days.
remember that. Okay.
I remember the days before the Magic Roundabout. Yeah,
All right.
even.
I used to have a record called Dougal and the Blue Cat. It was brilliant. Anyway,
I've got to go. I've got to. My voice is going a bit, so I'm going to top my drink up. But I'll only be 2 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll play the next.
Yeah, you play the next clip.
Okay.
Yeah, brilliant.
I can make huge exceptions. If there's like a piece of meat in there or whatever, I'm probably not going to be able to do that, even though it might be better sometimes to do that, but I probably can't.
Right, so that's a very small clip. So what Lena is saying, that we should allow for exceptions within veganism. And then it's clear that there is a moral difference being drawn between flesh of our fellow animals and the secretions of, and so, well, if there's a bit of meat in there, I probably can't eat it, but I probably should. It's the more rational thing to do it. So they're trying to work out all these scenarios in which vegans can eat the products of our fellow animals, and they clearly think that eating flesh is worse. And I think that comes back to, if you look at Melanie Joy's book, she says that it's possible to procure eggs and dairy without violence. Another thing that vegans don't tend to say, because this is another kind of problem we've got. We're dealing with a group of vegetarians, essentially, who have come into the vegan movement, and but they won't call themselves vegetarian, which is actually their position. Carnism is a vegetarian concept, right? But they want to call it veganism, and that's the bit that I don't understand. And that's the bit that confuses me. It's only a few seconds, Ronnie. I'm going to play that again for you, okay?
Oh, lovely, yes.
Yeah.
I can make huge exceptions. If there's like a piece of meat in there or whatever, I'm probably not going to be able to do that, even though it might be better sometimes to do that, but I probably can't.
Right. So what's been said there is that if you find, for example, that that there is eggs or mayonnaise with eggs in you, then you should eat that. But if there was some flesh in there, then he probably can't. He probably thinks he should do it, because otherwise he's going to cause all this trouble, but probably can't. So there's a moral distinction being made between flesh and other products derived from our fellow animals, which again is not a vegan thing to do in the first place.
No, not at all. It's like an aesthetic kind of distinction, isn't it? That's got really not anything to do with morals in that case.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Kind of, well, it's all based on this idea. It's all based on this idea that we shouldn't make veganism, because he accused me of wanting the smallest group in the world. He used to use this example. There was a Facebook group called the smallest group in the world. There was one member. And he says, if you try and join, I'll boot you out. And he says that vegans like myself, the purist, wants the smallest group in the world. And I say that I actually want the largest group in the world. It's just that the group that I want is made up of actual vegans, not vegetarians who are called vegan. I think there's a massive difference there.
Yes, yeah.
So let me find you our third clip. Now this is an interesting one, Ronnie. You'll like this one. This is where because I've always said that part of our advocacy is to be honest with people, and apparently that's not very well understood.
People who say like we should always at every moment be open from the beginning about what we're doing. It should be clear that vegan is the end goal. I don't know why they're saying that. I don't understand that.
What is there not to understand there, Ronnie?
Well, it isn't about vegan you know, veganism being the end goal in terms of, you know, people becoming vegan as individuals. It's about, you know, veganism being the now goal, isn't it? It's not that we want people to, you know, somebody to like eventually become vegan after like a number of years. You know, we want people to become vegan as soon as possible, don't we? I mean, having a world that operates according to vegan principles would be the end goal. But in order to achieve that end goal, we have to educate a hell of a lot of people to become vegan.
We do. Right. Let me show you this one. This is from a Q&A. Now this is about 5 minutes long, but I'm only going to play the first 2 minutes. Now this is where he's explaining to someone about this impossibility. In another video, he says, well, look, if you're very polite, someone like Melanie, meaning Melanie Joy, you might get away with it. But most vegans are not going to be able to explain to people what their moral position is. And so therefore, they're going to mess it up. And this is what he says here. Listen to this.
So I just want to preface it by saying I agree with like 83% of what you said. I calculated it, what you know. And I'm a longtime vegan, and I absolutely believe in a pragmatic approach and meeting people where they're at, and that's a non-issue for me. But where I have some issues with your approach is that I feel like you demonize and kind of unfairly characterize people who consistently maintain their vegan standards. Okay, so what I'm saying is that you can be consistent, even in your thought experiments. I opted for that without being a jerk and without being dogmatic. You can do that while still being friendly, while still being approachable and welcoming. So I just kind of feel like you set up some straw man kind of figures, and that's my main issue.
I understand. I've heard that before. I mean, demonizing is certainly not my intention, and sorry if it comes across as that. I mean, what I think I want to say is that, like, and I think I see how it is easy to believe that you can be entirely consistent and friendly and still have an impact, and I think it's possible, definitely. But I think in a lot of cases, a lot of people might be misguided about that. You know, so for instance, the example with the lasagna, I think it's easy to believe that, like, we are very friendly, and we explain this to them, and we say, like, I'm sorry, this is against my values, I cannot eat this, etc. But I think still, no matter how friendly you are, how nice you are, the evening will be problematic, and the host will be left with an idea of, like, oh my God, this was an embarrassing, no matter how nice you are, this was an embarrassing situation. They are further from becoming vegan, from understanding vegan than they were before. I think that in a lot of cases, a lot of people won't see that.
Right, so that's the argument, Ronnie, that we don't have the social skills to explain our values to people if issues come up.
But also when he talks about people becoming further from, you know, being vegan than they were before, then what is he? You know, what does he mean that veganism is? You know, that somebody has just said, look, I'm sorry, but I won't eat that. That contains animal products, and I don't consume animal products because of what that involves for the animals that are used to produce those things. Now that is veganism, is it? That opposition to the exploitation of our fellow animals is veganism, and somebody will understand that from what you've said. You know, they may not like that you've said it. They may not like that you haven't consumed the food they offered you, but they will have an understanding of what veganism is.
Yeah, where the discussion went in the AA Zone version of it before it came, before it ended up on the blog and all that, was he was saying that you couldn't even go and visit a friend without upsetting them, because you're not able to take social engagements. And we were saying, well, look, if you've got a non-vegan friend who is offering you a meal and then say, well, I'll do the cooking, then if they say, well, I'm going to do a lasagna, and then you know that a lot of lasagna's got, eggs in it, you would just have a quick word with your friend. They're your friend.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and the thing is, if that person is going to be unpleasant to you about it, then don't be their friend anymore.
they're not
Why
very,
do you
being very
desperately
friendly as a
need
friend,
that?
are they?
Why do you desperately need that person to be your friend if they're not going to understand, why you don't want to consume that? If they're going to get, unpleasant over the fact that you don't want to consume it, you don't need that person to be your friend, do you? What are you going to die if they're no longer your friend?
What about the other way around? If your friend goes, oh, either sorry or here's your stuff, it's not vegan, get on with it or something, and you go, okay, now what does that say to them about your morals anyway?
It says that it's something
not that
that you don't
important.
take seriously, and so if you're not taking it seriously, how could they be encouraged to take it seriously?
Yeah, kind of. Oh well, these vegans are a bit fast and loose about their morals anyway. So
It's a chance to educate people, isn't it? The refusal to eat that meal and explaining, politely and gently why you're not eating that meal. It's outreach, isn't it? It's a form of outreach. Now, whether that person, how that person will respond to that is a different matter, but that nevertheless is a form of outreach, and it could result in that person becoming vegan.
yeah, it's an odd one. Welcome back, Wendy.
I'm only back for 5 minutes. Thought I've got to go. It's very addictive chatting about this stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're being controlled by the needs of a poop.
Yep.
Yeah.
And cats. They've all told me off quite
We'll play this one. We've discussed this really, but we'll play this.
Today, some part of the movement uses tactics that I think are too radical, too aggressive, but I'm pretty sure that they can work very well in maybe 10 years, 20 years, I don't know when there's more public support for it.
So this is the thing where we're talking about the two phases, okay? And so he was very strong on that at one point, where he was saying that we're in the pre-vegan stage, and that therefore it's actually deleterious to talk about veganism. When he was part of vegetarian alternatives, he said, especially if you're talking to politicians, don't mention veganism. You're not going to get any money if you mention veganism. Which actually Matt Ball said the same thing. Matt Ball, who was a co-founder of Vegan Outreach in the mid-1990s, he came onto AR Zone and he said that they regret having vegan in their message because nobody will give them money. And so there's an interesting thing. We've talked about veganism being a scare word. Now, but who are we talking about it being a scare word to? Is it the public, or is it these big billionaire donors and these philanthropists? But then also, Wendy, you were saying about these surveys, which suggest that a lot of people have got a downer about veganism. Kind of where does that come from? And then you've got the supermarkets. I mean, the supermarkets have still got vegan signs all over the place. They don't seem to be too scared of the word. There was some research about whether are people taking all the vegan labels off and replacing it with plant-based. Well, as far as I know, they're not. Now, if veganism was such a scare word, they would be, wouldn't they?
Yeah. I think the whole hating vegans was a bit of do-gooder derogation, as they call it, in that it's vegans are sanctimonious and preachy and think they're superior in some way and that kind of thing. And often it's that thing that you're highlighting people's moral inconsistencies as well, isn't it? Just by being in the room and all of that. people don't want to really face head on things that they actually probably deep down agree with.
I mean, the one thing that I agree with Tobias Lehner for years.
Oh, hang on. Can we drum roll?
I know, yeah. Here comes is the fact that sometimes, especially when you're looking at social media, you know, the communication skills from activists is sometimes pretty poor. And that is probably something that we need to work on, because we should be able to get across our position without getting nasty and all that. But again, who are they talking about? Are they talking about AV on the street? You know, because we're going to move on to the ableist crazy vegan thing, because that was part of their construction. See, the part of this for the audience that don't know is that workshop after workshop, conference after conference, their message is essentially to new and recent vegans that the best thing you can do for veganism is not be a vegan. That's essentially their message, right?
But I think what you do is, you know, if we're concerned about the way that other people do outreach, what you do is you're trying to educate them to do vegan outreach in a way that's more effective. You're not wanting to persuade them not to do vegan outreach by advocating for something other, a watered down version, or by advocating for vegetarianism instead of veganism, isn't it? That's how you'd approach it.
And is it like Casey Taft's work speaks to, if you, the big ask, isn't it? Like if you ask someone, you know, if you really set out a very high goal, you might not get that. But by not asking for that high goal, you're never going to get anywhere near that, isn't it? Like reach for the moon.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, if you never ask for the big thing.
Whilst you're away, we showed the clip where he said he doesn't understand that approach. He says that if we say that the end goal of our position is veganism, he doesn't understand why we should say that. He thinks that we should lower it to not scare people away. Again, using the idea that veganism is a scare word.
So where are you going to say that to someone? Say I was talking to somebody, say at a store. You know, my aim is to educate, persuade, encourage that person to become vegan. So where does this thing about the end goal is come in?
I can give you an example from the 1980s. Gary Francione used to support a lot of these fur campaigns outside fur shops and stuff. And because he was a lawyer, he was often being asked questions by the press. And one time the press were going, yeah, but you know, it's not just fur that you're against, is it? You know, you'll actually want us to not be eating flesh next. You know, you'll be wanting a vegan world. And he said, yes, yeah, of course. That's where I would go with it. Now he was actually criticized by the people outside the fur shop for saying that, because again, it was saying too much. So
I suppose they were afraid people wouldn't support the fur campaign because they think there was.
It was when single issues were much more firmly established. I mean, for example, some people used to stand outside fur shops wearing a leather jacket, for example. Right. Now, obviously, that wouldn't happen anymore, but that used to be the case in the 80s.
It's one of the criticisms, isn't it, of the public used to always shout, "What you got on your feet? You've got leather. You're wearing leather." They always used to say that. Yeah.
I was going to write "fuck off" on my shoes, so that everyone looked down would see it. Very liable to make them become vegan.
Right. Let's have a bit more purism.
You want to be like a really pure vegan. You learn all about, you know, we're vegan, you know, what's not vegan, you know, I mean, of course, eggs and dairy is, you know, it's quite obvious. And then you go to honey and then you do little ingredients and everything. And if you look at the curve, for example, like, you know, if again, we look at the impact our own diet has, you know, being an omnivore is not a lot of impact. And then,
so people who don't know, this is Sebastian Joy, Melanie Joy's husband, again at the Animal Rights Conference in Luxembourg. This is where that bit of civil disobedience took place. And again, veganism has been reduced to a diet, as always with these arguments.
if you're being a flexitarian, that's, you know, you're already starting, you know, to save some animals. If you're being vegetarian, you're even better. And then if you're vegan, you have more impact. And the effort, of course, you know, also grows. But actually, if you're a purist vegan, in some ways, it's actually, I mean, there's way more effort you have to put into in becoming like a pure vegan. You know, if you really like every tiny ingredient, you know, for each, even if you order like a salad in a restaurant, you ask, well, but the vinegar in the salad, how has this been clarified? Because otherwise I don't want to eat the salad. So I made the experience, you know, it's actually, you're generating way more effort, so, but actually the impact actually goes down because first of all, I mean, it's a lot of time you're spending, and people around you, if they actually see you, if you really make it look complicated being a vegan, you actually, you know, you're sending a bad message. I mean, maybe you think that maybe there are some people who are mighty, oh my God, he's like, you know, she's like holy, like a Jain, you know, who actually walks and wipes the floor. But I mean, Jainism, I mean, it's good to have some of those people around, but it's not probably not going to become like a very popular religion.
Okay, well, if it's good to have Jains around, it would be good to have vegans around them, wouldn't it?
This is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. I mean, there are.
I mean, this has been going on for years, though.
I know.
Yeah. I mean,
purist vegan versus effective vegan. I mean,
I think in a sense, you kind of, there is a trade-off in a sense between things, because say that, like for instance, today, I went to do a stall in my nearest town at an event where I was promoting veganism, and I went in. I had to take the materials in the car, so I drove there. And in driving there, I'd have caused a degree of pollution, wouldn't I? And there would have been some chance that I might have run over an animal on the road, possibly. So, you know, in a personal sort of vegan sense, that kind of, those are negative things. But then, and so somebody could say, well, if you were a purist vegan, in terms of what you do personally, you wouldn't have gone to do the stall. But of course, in doing the stall, educating people to become vegan, for me, that the good of doing the stall outweighed the negative aspects of traveling to do the stall, if you see what I mean. And so I think there is that aspect of things where people are, you know, you could have a situation where somebody was trying to be so personally pure that it would sabotage their efforts to educate others. For instance, I say, I want to be a perfectly pure vegan. I'm going to go and live in the middle of Wales. I'm going to grow my own allotment. I'm not going to have the internet, you know, because that, you know, all of that harms the environment and therefore harms our fellows. I'm not going to do any of that. But obviously that, in doing that, I reduced my ability.
Well, this is the vegan suicide argument. In the 1990s, the counter movements, they all started coming out with this line: to be a real vegan, you need to commit suicide.
Yes, I think this idea that there is an area where, you know, sort of too much personal purity can adversely affect our ability to educate others.
Yeah, but you don't know anybody who lives in a cave, though, do you, Ronnie?
I don't know anyone that lives in a cave.
You don't know any vegans who live in a cave. So the people that they're calling purists are not them. Yeah. They're us.
They're not. They're not them. No.
Yeah, they're us. Yeah.
No. Oh yeah, they are us. But I don't.
Most people in the chat are probably going to be purist You know, the ones who just try to be morally consistent, these are the purists in their construction. By the way, folks, I've put the, if you see Vegan Review in the chat, that's the link to our studio if you want to come on and have a word, because we wanted to do a bit of an open mic type thing. Let's go back to now. We're going to move on to another part of the construction of all this, is the ableist thing about the crazy vegan. So this is the idea that vegan activists act very irrationally. They're not irrational, and therefore somebody who's rational, even if they're not a vegan, are going to help fellow animals more than vegans do. And this became a really kind of strong theme within their kind of construction. And I thought it had gone, but there was a recent interview where Leonard was interviewing, or at least hosting, Peter Singer, and he comes up with the crazy vegan stereotype again. So here's first of all Sebastian Joy doing it. Here we go.
Then you might, try a very aggressive approach. And I was always wondering, why do actually some vegans still do it? I mean, do they really think it makes sense? And then I actually think, well, in their model, it actually makes sense, because what happens, you might have seen it on YouTube, there are these really angry talks or whatever, where people yell at each other. But people actually do it, or some other gross things, because what happens is once in a while, one person actually crosses over and becomes vegan, because it just resonates, they get oh my God, what's happening? But, once in a while somebody is like that. And if you only look at the scale, either you're vegan or you're not vegan, you think, okay, somebody crossed. So, you gave a talk, you yelled at everybody, and after that, there's one or two people coming up to you, oh my God, that was a great talk, I'm going vegan now. And then you think, yeah, it's amazing, it worked, I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna go the next time, I'm gonna scream in everybody's face, and as long as there are people coming up to me, I know it's working. But what people might not see is that all the remaining people, they might actually moving this way, because they're like, oh my God, that's some crazy vegan, I don't know.
Right, so again, there's a million things in that, screaming in people's faces, and all the rest of it. And they were telling new and impressionable vegans that that's what vegan activism looked like.
Mostly it's not. I mean, you do get the occasional person. There was a woman I knew that we used to hate if she came to help on outreach, because she would kind of get very angry with people and say, are you vegan? And they go, oh, I'm not. Why aren't you vegan? What's the matter with you? And she'd be like that. You think, oh no, that's not a good way to do outreach. Occasionally you get people like that, but I would say that very much.
Presumably you would have a word with that person.
You'd have a word with, or you'd try to kind of not tell her about things that were happening. You would have a gentle word with someone like that and say, well, look, you kind of, you're putting people off. You're not enabling us to explain to that person why it's important to become vegan. That's the thing.
Well, I would obviously not rule out. But the thing is, I've done street stalls since the 1980s, and I don't think I've ever known people. Well, certainly people like this. Have a look at this. This is Leonard's version of the same thing. Now, see if you recognize this person here.
Being moderate is much more dangerous for them than being radical. If you're a radical, if you're like a crazy person, like shouting in the street, let's just take it extreme, let's take a really crazy vegan, literally, and he's shouting everywhere and blah, blah, blah. Nobody takes him seriously, right? But it's if you have a moderate person, something like Peter Singer, he's not entirely vegan, but he's much more dangerous to the meat industry because he's so rational, and he can convince people, and the crazy people are not going to convince him. some, I mean, the people who would do civil disobedience and direct action today, they would say it is to garner attention for these topics and to to get it in the media and to really create more a bigger dynamic of other people who want to stand up, etc. Do you see a place for that at this point, like for of course non-violent and not crazy, but still confrontational direct action, civil disobedience?
He was trying to get Singer to agree with his 10-year delay thing there, you know.
Yeah. But no, I mean, that person I mentioned, she's the only person I know who was ever like that in with outreach, to be honest. So very, very rare. Very rare.
Well, you know, even if you look at videos, I mean, obviously you can't, you know, Earthling Ed is not that, Joey Carlstrong's not that, AV is not that, We the Free is not that. I mean, no. Do you see videos where they're waving and screaming?
No, you don't. No, it's not. It's virtually non-existent. No.
I know. I've come back on, by the way, just to say goodbye. But hello, goodbye. But just before I go, I just want to say from those videos, they're really conflating confrontational with radical, and saying that radical can't be rational. And that's total nonsense. You can be radical and rational and non-confrontational. So it's just a non-argument, really. I don't really, I can understand why you'd be against confrontational outreach, because I think that is quite off-putting for people. And maybe there's the odd person on, you know, social media who does the old gotcha outreach, you know, or walks off when you're not listening. We have seen a few clips of that. I think majority, like you just said, the majority of people are not doing outreach like that. They're having, you know, genuine, sincere, respectful conversations with people. So I just think it's conflating and creating this identity that doesn't exist out there.
I think radical gets conflated with militant, and they're not the same thing at all. Radical isn't.
No, exactly.
Radical is you know, going to the root of things, and dealing with fundamental issues, and that can be done very gently. And in fact, it's best done that way. It's not anything to do with shouting and screaming and stuff. Yeah.
And just to say, we are a radical movement. It is a radical movement. Veganism is radical, animal rights is radical, and we have just got to get used to that and get comfortable being uncomfortable, because it is, at this point, we are the trailblazers, and it is a radical movement. And anything less than that is not going to push the envelope and is not going to change structural and systemic oppression of our fellow animals. And it is radical.
There are ways and means. I mean, Jan here is saying, I've seen young women being shocked, at least, by activists loudly talking about the insemination of the cow by the farmer and putting fist action to the words, very insensitive. I mean, obviously, we in the Animal Rights Show, we talked about using like the R word in relation to artificial insemination, those kind of things. And it's funny because Joey Carlstrong said that he used to use the R word a lot. And then he realized that if he described artificial insemination to people, they would then go, blimey, that sounds like, and they would use the R word. And it seems to me that that's a much better way of this word coming up. If somebody listens to a vegan explaining what artificial insemination means, and they go, blimey, it's the same as some people will say, if you start talking about, say, the gas chambers, right? People are going to make the Nazi connection, but without you saying it yourself, So that's just a question of maybe insensitive. The other side of that is the fact that, well, it is also the truth. So, you can't shield people from the truth. And that's what the farming industry try and do, shield people from the truth. So it is our job to break through that. but I do agree that we can learn trial and error, talking about, how did it go with you? What do you think? I mean, we the Free do that, don't they? They have a little meeting afterwards. How did that go?
I think sometimes, yeah. But the thing is, but this is about improving the way that people advocate for veganism. It isn't saying to them, don't advocate for veganism.
Yeah, so improving our communication skills and how we converse with people. Yeah. I'm going to say goodbye, folks. It's been so lovely to chat. I could chat about these things all day.
Jack in a Box Wendy is going again, folks.
I know. I'm literally a slave to these little monkeys, I tell you. You know what it's like, Ronnie, don't you?
I do indeed.
You've got primates in there now, have you?
No, that would be a tricky one, wouldn't it? But lovely to chat to you, and great to see so many brilliant comments there as well. The chat's been really lively.
The chat's been good. It's hard to keep up with it. We've got one more clip. So
I'm going to see you all soon.
Yeah. Take care, Wendy.
Take care.
Bye.
My pleasure to remove. I've removed Wendy 3 times now during this, so that's been great. That's been great. So that's been fun. Now this is an interesting one. This is Peter Singer himself.
Another 2% of the world's population to be vegan is not going to reduce meat consumption nearly as much as getting all the non-vegan people to have a meat-free day, or what is Mark Bittman suggested, vegan until 6 p.m. or something like that. All of those strategies would have a much bigger impact in reducing animal suffering than getting another 1 or 2% to be vegans.
Right, I feel quite strongly about that, because even if we assume that was true, it doesn't mean that vegans should do that. Somebody somewhere has got to be talking to people about veganism, and in Donald Watson's words, ripening people up to veganism. Yeah. So somebody's got to do that. The only people who will do that are the vegans. Now, we also know that a lot of vegans are not active. And we also know that there's a section of the people, or the vegans, who are active, who won't do vegan outreach. They'll do other things like single issue and all that kind of stuff. Now, okay, so they can do all that. The vegans who will do vegan outreach, surely, because there's so few of us.
But you see, there's a couple of things I'd say about that. And the first thing is, say we were, the idea of meat-free Mondays. Say I set something up called Mug-Free Mondays for muggers, and said to muggers, look, mugging isn't very nice. How about you not do any mugging on the Monday? You can carry on mugging people the rest of the week, but don't do any mugging on a Monday. I mean, how would that be seen as a strategy against mugging? Instead of just saying, well, look, mugging is totally wrong.
I'm not as concerned by that, Ronnie.
Yeah.
As that being in the vegan equivalent, being called veganism.
Yeah.
I mean, if people want to do meat-free Monday, and of course the egg industry have said that meat-free Monday is a great boost for them, because it means that everybody has omelette on a Monday, right?
Yeah.
The point is, it's not veganism. That's the main thing.
It's not veganism, because you go back to the fact that veganism is a philosophy. So philosophy isn't something you adhere to until 6 p.m. and then you no longer adhere to it, or you only adhere to it on a Monday, is it? It's something you either hold to or you don't all the time. First of all, there's that, and secondly, I think the problem with advocating for those things is they set limits on what people could do. In other words, I think if you advocate for veganism, you encourage people to be vegan, you educate people as to why it's important to become to become vegan and to, do their best to avoid consuming animal products as well, as well as involvement in other forms of the exploitation of our fellow animals. If that's what you encourage people to do, then I think those people kind of find their own level. Those people that can go the whole way will. The one that can't will go some of the way.
Yeah.
But you're not restricting anyone from going all the way. Whereas if you have things like Meat Free Monday, you have if you
don't tell them where you're going, you're automatically doing that, aren't you? If they don't know where the end game, we're back to the end game. If they don't know the destination is veganism,
no,
they'll never try and get to it, right?
No, that's right. No, because I've had personal experience of this, where I've spoken to somebody about veganism at a stall and the reasons to become vegan, and then they've come up to me at a substance call and sort of said to me, "Oh, I'm getting there. I'm kind of, I mean, they get confused with it, but they say, I most of my meals are vegan now, and I occasionally, have non-vegan meals.
Yeah,
but I've not said for them to do that. I've just talked about becoming vegan, and they found their own level.
Didn't flag them off for taking time either, because I've had people
come to
the stall and say, I'm really interested in veganism, but I'm struggling with this and I'm struggling with that, the social side of it, or whatever, right? Some of the younger people, I'm still with my parents, so that's a difficulty and all that kind of stuff. But they know where they want to go, but they're on the journey. Now, if we didn't tell them what the end of the journey was, they couldn't even be aiming for it.
No, that's right. That's right. We want, and if you set, because to me, talking about, say, Meat Free Mondays is imposing a limit. It's kind of preventing people, in a sense, from going further than that. And that's the danger I see in those campaigns.
I tend to think, Ronnie, that it's dishonest. I put a lot of store, I suppose. Don't know, maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned like this, but I actually value honesty. And like, if somebody says, what's your position on our relations with our fellow animals, I say, well, it's a vegan position. And then they can make of it what they want. I mean, we're going back to, and one thing you said there about that they can do what they want with our message. I mean, that's what you get from media sociology. We transmit a message, and then the audience, they decode it. But we can't dictate the way that they're going to decode our message.
Yeah.
But we can control what we put out as our message. We put an abolitionist message out, and people go, "Oh, I'll just go vegetarian instead." Well, we can't do anything about that.
No, that's right.
But at least we put out our abolitionist message, because that's where.
But putting out an abolitionist message doesn't prevent people from going part of the way. That's not what we're asking them to do, but it doesn't stop them from doing that, does it? If that's how they deal with it.
Yeah, this is interesting. There's a couple of really interesting points. Veganism is too radical even for vegans. Conformity has a stronger pull than morality. Now, sociologically, most people in society are conformists. Most people tend to conform, generally speaking, to the norms and values of society. But there's this weird thing that, I'm an individual, I am, and then kind of the way that they express their individuality is that everybody has a smartphone, but they get to choose the color of it. So there's a bit of a weird thing going on, that everybody is doing what everybody else does, but they still insist that they're actually, a free thinker and all that kind of stuff. In actual fact, most of the things that we do and say, even the way we dress and all the rest of it, is mediated by society. I used to say to my students, first-year students, I used to say, I noticed that nobody has come to the lecture dressed in their bathing suit or dressed as a frog person or whatever. Everybody has come dressed as a student. with their pens and paper, or latterly with their laptops. I've come as the lecturer with my notes, and here I am with the microphone and all that. I'm ready to give the lecture. You're ready to receive it. We're conformists. We create a lecture by me acting the role as lecturer and they acting the role of students. And everybody conforms to that construction. We do it all the time in society.
Yeah, I think there are pulls in different directions. I think that there are these, you know, kind of traits within humans to behave in certain ways, and one is to be the same as everyone else. The other one is to continue doing what you've always done, and those are very strong pulls in, you know, within humans. But we're trying to pull people the other way by showing them, you know, what, you know, why it is wrong to exploit and oppress our fellow animals, for instance, and why it's important to become vegan. And we're trying to kind of pull them away from that conformity and pull them away from that that habit, that force of habit. And so there's a kind of tension there, isn't there? But I think that what happens is, what we're trying to get to, I think, is a tipping point. In other words, if people want to be kind of, they're desperate to be seen as normal. I find that I kind of do understand that people are like that, but I've kind of never been like that myself, if you see what I mean. So it's not something, it's a general thing within humans rather than that absolutely everyone's like that. So what you do is, if you the more people we educate to become vegan, so it then becomes more kind of normal to be vegan, and so then it's easier for people. So that pull towards normality, so that's kind of away from veganism, that becomes weaker. And it's the same, I think, with the kind of, you know, doing what you've always done type of thing. I mean, people can be persuaded to change from what they've always done.
Well, people are changing all the time, Ronnie.
And they change all the time. But I think,
this comment will interest you because you've spoken about this. Radical implies extreme. How extreme it is not to think animals are objects. Now, obviously, you've made that distinction between radical and militant. But the point is, we've got to, if you like, promote the radical way of looking at things, because that just means going to the roots, right?
Well, if you're talking about, well, it depends when people use the word extreme, they tend to use it in a kind of negative sense, don't they? But I would say, well, I would ask people, define extreme. When you're calling something extreme, what do you actually mean by that? Let's talk about what you mean by the word extreme. Give me another word for that word, if you see what I mean. And then the other thing is that if extreme is like, has got this negative connotation that somehow it's a kind of bad thing, then what can be more extreme than exploiting our fellow animals, you know, and exploit, you know, for instance, exploiting them for food when we absolutely don't need to do that. No, what can be more extreme than that in terms of negative behavior?
Yeah, I mean, there is that, you know, that thing. Let's the last bit. I'm going to finish off with a clip from Peter Singer, folks, and I'm actually quite sympathetic to Singer on this, and I'll explain when we get to it.
The farmer who, you know, let's say likes scrutin himself, as I said, you know, has a few animals, gives them really good lives, and takes care that when they're killed painlessly. I now find it harder to say exactly why that's wrong, because after all, for those who, some people in the audience may not know, I'm a utilitarian, which means I'm concerned to produce the best consequences for all of those affected. And I don't think that there's an absolute right to life, either for humans nor for non-human animals. So I'm more open to that argument, and perhaps for that reason, explains part of what I said about the conservatives that I'm prepared to side with. You know, I'm prepared to work together with people who are opposed to factory farming and want to see that abolished, even if they still eat meat and I don't, but they only eat meat from animals who have reasonably good lives.
Okay, so the first thing to say to that is that, okay, taking all that on board, you don't have to call yourself a vegan. And to his credit, Peter Singer has never called himself a vegan. He's called himself a flexible vegan. And this is where Leonard gets quite a lot of his ideas, because he said in one essay, I think it was Mother something, I can't quite remember the name of it now, but he said in one essay that there's nothing wrong with having the luxury every now and again of a non-vegan meal, right? That's what he said. And so obviously we're going to go, whoa, right? But he described himself as a flexible vegan. Leonard has called himself in the past veganish. Now, I don't mind that so much, because at least they're not calling themselves vegan. Because the objection I have with all of this is that you've got a load of people who for some reason reject veganism, but they'll nevertheless insist on being called vegans. And that is the bit that I fail to understand. This bit here, this is interesting. This is from about 1976. And this is responding to a review of Animal Liberation, because Peter Singer has always been honest about his position, not vegan, because he said in Animal Liberation that he can't really see a moral problem with free-range egg production. He couldn't really see a problem with that. He's also never been totally opposed to all vivisection, most of it, but not all vivisection, right? And so here he's responding to a review, and he was saying, why is it surprising that I have little to say about the nature of rights? You know, it would only be surprising if one assumes that my case for animal liberation is based on rights, and in particular upon the idea of extending rights to animals. That is not my position at all. That has been his position all the time. And if you see in the brackets down below, with the benefit of hindsight, I regret that I allowed the concept of a right to intrude into my work. Now, he said that consistently since the 1970s. He's not an animal rights person, he's not a vegan, and he doesn't claim to be it. The problem for me is the people who aren't vegan, but they want veganism to fit their rebranded version of it. Why can't they just leave veganism to the vegans and just call themselves something else?
Yeah,
there's no shortage of words. If
but going back to what Peter
said, call yourself vegetarian.
I know. It's I don't understand it. But going back to what Peter Singer said, it's interesting. He said he didn't believe in the concept of rights.
Yeah.
But you see, even from a utilitarian perspective, the problem I had with what he said about, I'm okay with, the animals given a good life and then the animals killed. And I'm okay with that because I don't believe that the animal has a right to life. But what about the denial? Even if you didn't believe in the right to life, what about the denial of all those years of life to that animal and the joy and the pleasurable experiences?
It doesn't count, Ronnie, because do you know the author Lee Hall? Lee Hall?
Yes.
Well, she really attacked Singer because he came out with a book, I think it's called Practical Ethics. And he said in that our fellow animals are replaceable. So he said that if you painlessly kill, say, a chicken individual, and you replace her with another who has the same quality of life or better, then there's no moral wrong with that. They're replaceable.
So you can, but surely then you could do the same with humans, and say that you kind of had a farm for children.
He did get into trouble with all his, when he ended up at Princeton and had all those, people with different abilities campaigning against him, because he was talking about aborting children and all kinds of stuff.
But say you had this breeding centre for children, and where children were constantly bred, and they were allowed to live to say the age of 2 years old, and in those 2 years they were, they lived in the most marvelous conditions, were given wonderful food, cared for, loved, given lovely toys to play with, and at the age of 2 years old they were painlessly, without knowing anything about it, killed, and then they were replaced by other children that were allowed to live to 2 years old. Does Peter Singer believe that that would be acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting into Logan's Run territory here, but
yeah.
There is no right to life. He said that in that clip.
Yeah, but that would mean that example I've just given about the children, he'd find that perfectly okay, because that's exactly what happens with our fellow animals that are kept on farms. In terms of the equivalent of their lifespan, there may be.
It's a fraction of their natural lifespan.
It's a fraction of their natural lifespan.
Yeah.
So does he make a distinction between humans and our fellow animals? And if he does, where's the rational basis for that distinction?
Well, as he described in that thing, he's a utilitarian, and he always has been. And so it's always the question of working out the best consequences for everybody and all that. And of course, if you think back to when Tom Reagan did the animal rights debate, which is still online on Andy Atkinson's channel at least, Reagan described our movement's main philosophy, utilitarianism, as morally bankrupt. He said that the main philosophy that we as a movement adhere to is morally bankrupt. And so this is why he was drummed out of the movement. They couldn't deal with Reagan. He was too radical for the welfarists. Because Singer fits with welfare because it's a welfare position. But
yeah,
that's why we've got a welfare movement now. Everybody talks about cruelty. Nobody talks about rights violations. We've got even though people say animal rights, they use that rhetorically, as we know. They don't use it philosophically like Reagan would. Talk about rights holding. That they're rights holders, they're rights bearers. That means that our use of them is a rights violation. That's not the language of our movement. Our language is more akin to the RSPCA than it is to Tom Reagan.
Yes, I mean there isn't discussion about the fundamental wrong. I mean, obviously, cruelty does exist in how humans treat other animals. But that's not the fundamental wrong. That's in addition to the fundamental wrong, isn't it, of them being exploited? And you don't get people talking about that.
No, and so my position mirrors each other. I've always said that if the animal welfarists who reject philosophical animal rights would stop calling themselves animal rights, it would mean then that the animal rights people would be able to explain their position to the media and to the public, and then therefore they could assess that position. The confusion is when you've got animal welfarists who insist on being called animal rights. Now you've got non-vegans who insist on being called vegans. It's a natural mirror of what happened before. It's happened all over again, and it's to do ultimately with money.
Well, you see, I think yes, because there's, there is more money in welfarism. I mean, we kind of see this today with kind of, in a sense, what I'd call chimera organisations, where they partly advocate for animal rights and they partly advocate for welfare. And Peter is, yeah. Well,
they might say the word, Ronnie.
Well, some of their campaigns, let's say, are abolitionist, and some of them are welfarist, or they'll even advocate for veganism, encourage people to become vegan, and then run welfarist campaigns. And Peter's example, and Animal Justice Project is an example of that, where they'll advocate veganism, but then they'll run campaigns that have welfarist objectives. And I think money is at the root of that, because it's much easier to gain a so-called victory when campaigning for welfare than when campaigning for veganism or campaigning for abolition. And so I think that's driven by the need to raise money.
Yes, indeed. There's some good chat going on. I suppose we're going to have to wrap up pretty soon.
Yes, it's been very interesting.
Yeah.
But I think once again,
do you think veganism is under attack, Ronnie? I've claimed that veganism is under attack. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think yes. I think it's been undermined. There's an effort to undermine veganism, isn't there?
It's not just a process of evolution.
No, it's kind of not evolution, because people are kind of deliberately doing it, aren't they? But I think what's important is to kind of think about what should be our response to it, and really the only response we can make is one of inreach, isn't it? And what we've been doing this evening is part of that. It's kind of educating people who claim to be vegan, identify as vegans, what veganism really means.
I think there's a really distasteful issue here, which is the fact that if you think that the type of veganism that we adhere to is the type that it was articulated by people like Kathleen Janaway, Eva Batt to some extent, Cross and Watson, the Hendersons. Now, that only lasted for 20 years. For the rest of the time that the Vegan Society has existed, it's been much more wishy-washy and welfarist. So again, in some senses, if somebody goes, who are you to try to go back there? See, all the new people coming into the movement, let's use Earthling Ed as an example. He comes into an animal welfare movement, he gets socialized as an animal welfarist, and so he then thinks that veganism is about reducing animal suffering. And that's the way he's always characterized veganism, and said that he feels more comfortable doing that than saying anything else about veganism. But in some senses, he's just been socialized by the movement that he's entered.
Yeah.
And then they might say, well, okay, you're talking about the 1940s and 1950s. That was then, mate. This is now. They could say that, couldn't they?
Well, they could say it, but it doesn't change what veganism is. Veganism is what it is, what it was originally defined as. Because
what worries me, Ronnie, because that's not what veganism is to them.
It's not to them, but then our response to that is to try to explain to them and educate them as to what veganism really is. That's kind of all we can do in response to that.
No, but Ronnie, are we really saying that's what veganism was? Is that what we're saying?
No, that's what veganism is, because otherwise anyone can just say veganism is anything they want it to be, can't they?
They do though.
They do that, but that doesn't mean that is what veganism really is, does it? That might be what they think it is, but
going back to something I said an hour and a half ago. If the majority of vegans say veganism is a diet, doesn't that make veganism a diet?
No, it doesn't. No, because veganism is always, what it was intended to be by the founders. Because otherwise, anyone can, what if someone changes the diet that veganism is supposed to be, and say, well, the vegan diet can include honey, the vegan diet can include eggs.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do.
That's what they're trying to do. But that doesn't mean that therefore is therefore veganism, just because that's what they want it to be, or even with some people, that's what they might believe it to be. That doesn't mean that it actually is what it is. It kind of is what it is, even if the majority don't understand or believe that. It still remains that.
Yeah, Leonard said that setting the bar of veganism to mean the total avoidance of products derived from our fellow animals at all time. He says that pitches the meaning of veganism far too high for non-vegans. And so therefore we've got to bring the entry cost down. Now, that view is really big now on Instagram, on TikTok. I see it all the time. People are saying, look, we've got to be pragmatic. We've got to meet, I mean, like that woman said, we need to meet people where they are. Because I used to say, well, they're in McDonald's, mate. You know, we don't necessarily want to meet them where we are. We want to get them out of there, right? And so, but the point is, you know, the stuff that the Melanie Joy cartel have done through people like Leonard and through people like Sebastian Joy, that's had a big impact on the movement. And a lot of people would agree with their position because they reflect it all the time. They are repeating it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, even like Viva now have got a campaign. It seems to have gone quiet, where they were. It was something about someone being a hero by reducing their consumption of animal products, which is very much along with, you know, Melanie Joy and Sebastian Joy and Tobias Leonard. They did launch that campaign, which I was somewhat shocked about because I know that, you know, some of their stuff has been dodgy, but they've never gone as dodgy as that before. But I don't really know what's happened to that because that's gone really, really quiet. So,
well, you know, I mean, you obviously you're in that new book. How long shall these things be? By Martin Wybrow, and so was Juliet. And she said in that, so it must have been a recent interview, that it is easier to promote vegetarianism than veganism. So they hold on to that. You know, they were one of the last of the national groups to move towards veganism. And even then, they wanted to present it as a diet. We've got a lot of resistance to veganism within the animal movement.
But I don't understand this idea of easier to promote. It's really easy to promote.
You're not asking for as much.
Well, no, you're not asking, but like there's no there's no philosophical basis to it, though, is there? Because the, you know, dairy and eggs still involve the exploitation of our fellow animals. So, as you say, it's being promoted as a diet rather than as a philosophy.
Well, it's like a step forward. I mean, you know, every little helps. I mean, that's the view of a lot of people. I mean, that argument, that every little helps argument, is going on at the moment about the beagles who have been bought, and about, you know, what are the ramifications. And apparently, there's some kind of clause, non-disclosure clause, built into the agreements. So it means that the lab can't tell the public the full details, and neither can the sanctuaries who've taken the beagles. And so people are going, well, okay, so they've taken, you know, 1,500 from 2,000. So what about the 500 left? And there's, oh, well, we don't know, right? But
yeah,
going, yeah, but it's a step forward. It's one, you know, it's kind
but is it in that money is going into that industry that, you know, uses?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, Deb was looking at this, and Deb did a lot of research on this. Apparently, they might have part of their agreement might be that they can't use the money they've got from the beagles to buy more beagles. But that might not mean that they can't buy rabbits. Or it doesn't mean that they can't.
You see, the difficulty. There's a lot of different things. It could do a whole show, a whole other show about just this. That, you know, is it really kind of, you know, moving us forward, or moving the USA forward to, to an ending of experiments on our fellow animals
people say you've got to consider the 150 individuals, and it's brilliant for them.
Well, the difficulty with that, yes, it's quite obviously better for them, the same way as it's better for the beagles that are rescued from MBR acres, but like there's other things to consider. For instance, if that doesn't coincide, if the reason why those if that doesn't coincide with or cause or be part of causing a reduction in the number of experiments on our fellow animals, then what will happen is those beagles that were rescued will either be replaced by other beagles or other animals of another species. So what's happening is those beagles are being saved, and it's great for them, but other animals will be condemned in their place.
Yeah, but
that's the first
the thing is, you'll be accused of pouring cold water over a victory.
Well, no, I'm not saying that the whole, that's an aspect of it. There is a positive aspect of it, that it kind of it's all part of it's all part of a kind of building up of pressure or building up of awareness that may well lead to a reduction.
Well, we're a bit long in the tooth now, Ronnie, and I think we're a bit fed up of taking things at face value, whether it is the hunting ban or whether it's banning fur farms. I mean, like, they never tell the people who support the fur farm thing that they're going to make the fur farmers into multimillionaires, and they never. All they're going to do is transfer the mink to Europe. And then if the ban there, then they'll get transferred to China. They don't say that. They give you the headline, and everybody can go victory. And that's what a lot of people are going. It's a victory, and it is for the 1,500 beagles.
But is it? But not for those that will be, exploited and killed and tortured even in their place.
And the other thing is that we just do what we can or what's available at the time.
Well, I mean, that's got to be weighed up against the sort of, how can we say, the publicity created by these events that may change things or may be part of changing things. So that's got to be kind of weighed in the balance as well, of course.
And what we're doing here, don't you, Ronnie? We're doing an elaborate utilitarian calculus.
Yeah. Yes, of course. But you say, once again, if we're talking about, doing a utilitarian calculus and working out what's the best use of our time, energy, and money, then I'd pose the question: wouldn't it be better for all of that effort to be put into vegan education? Wouldn't that yield, greater results? Because there's a short-term benefit to vegan education as well, as well as the long-term, aim of changing society, changing the culture of society, changing the politics of society through creating more vegans. There's a short-term benefit, isn't there? Because for every person, certainly in the UK, that becomes vegan, no longer consumes animal products, results in a reduction of demand for about 100 animals a year to be exploited and killed. So you've got that short-term benefit of encouraging and persuading people to become vegan as well.
I've got a modified version of what we've always said, Ronnie, which is we both agree that we need vegan education everywhere and all the time, and we've never had that. I think the movement exaggerates the amount of vegan education that there's ever been. Some people will still insist that we've been doing it for 80 years or we've been doing it for 50 years, and none of that is true. And even if we were, it's a small little amount of it. But I've modified my thing in the sense that I realize, just as we've realized all along, a lot of vegans won't be activists. I've also realized that a lot of vegan activists won't do vegan education. So it seems to me, let them do whatever they want. If they want to do single issues, if they want to do Camp Beagle, if they want to do all that, let them do that. But what concerns me is if the vegans who will do vegan education get diverted, then that seems to me a terrible shame, because there's so few of us, a fraction of a fraction, and yet we're still being, oh yeah, but what about doing this? What about doing that? You know, they've always wanted the vegans to pull away from doing the vegan stuff to doing something else. You know, whereas you go, okay, well, you do that, or get your vegetarians to do that. There's more vegetarians than vegans. There's more reducitarians than vegans and vegetarians. So let's have a division of labor. So that's where I'm at now. Let's have a division of labor and let the vegans do veganism. And that entails people who don't even agree with veganism to stop calling themselves vegan, because that is so frustrating for me. I just think, how the hell could you even get to the situation where I don't like veganism, but I'm going to call myself vegan, and to do that, I'm going to change what veganism means, and then I'm going to define veganism back down to vegetarianism, and then call that veganism. I mean, that is like a form of corruption, as far as I can see.
Yeah. But you hope that, you know, in order for them to stop doing that, they would have to take notice of the type of thing that you've just said, and what we've been talking about in this show, wouldn't they? If we're going to somehow persuade them no longer to do that.
It's a numbers game, isn't it? I mean, there's so few vegans, and then you think, okay, there's even fewer active vegans, and then you're dividing it again between the ones who will and the ones who won't. You know, and then if somebody trots along and says, well, here's a type of veganism which means that all you got to do is give money to Mercy for Animals, or here's a type of veganism which means that you can eat fishes and cookies with eggs in it. I mean, they're giving them the easy option. We're sticking to the, you know, what it originally means, and then people go, oh, that's a bit extreme.
Yeah. I mean, all we could do is keep on keeping on like we've done in this show, to try and kind of put it out there.
Too long.
Yeah. Hope that people will take notice, to be honest. There we are.
Yes, I hope everybody's taking notes. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of chat about the Beagle thing. I mean, we don't want to get into the Beagle thing. It's just, it's my fault.
No.
To bring it up, really, but
I mean, I don't know all the full facts about the Beagle, the Beagle rescue. I kind of really don't.
I mean, like here it said, victory, the Beagles are being released. I also saw the words like liberated being used, and then we got the news that they're being bought, right? And now, of course, which is interesting, is that you're getting a lot of people on vegan groups and now trying to fundraise to support those who have been bought.
You get the same with expatriate hens, don't you, where they're bought from the rescuers, buy them from the farmer, and often at a greater price than what would be paid, you know, by the
the worst thing about that part of it is if you go back to the farm part, because somebody came up to us in a stall a few years ago, said that they were part of that scheme, and they said the problem is they're giving more money to the farmer than they would get if they took them to slaughter.
Yeah.
So the farmer's making money, and then the rescue makes money.
But wouldn't more animals be actually spared by all that effort and money and that being put into vegan outreach? If you're just going to play a numbers game, but the number of animals that you spare, you know, from
I mean, if you've got a pile of chickens in a van versus you going, oh, I planted a few seeds. Well, one seems like a bit out of focus, and
I think this is the problem, and I think this is the difficulty, that this immediatist thinking. And once again, this is a trait throughout humans.
Yeah, it's attractive, isn't it?
Isn't just confined to vegans and people who are concerned about our fellow animals. It's that if I sort of put two fundraisers up, one was about an animal's been rescued from somewhere, this calf or whatever, and send money to help us care for this particular animal. So there was that one fundraiser, and next to it I put another fundraiser, so I'm raising money for vegan outreach to produce materials to enable us to do outreach. Which of those fundraisers would get the most money? I think we both know the answer to that. And it'd be that one about the caring for that individual animal. It wouldn't be the outreach, yet the outreach would really spare far more animals than fundraising for like the one individual or just a small group of individuals.
You've got a demonstration problem. You can't demonstrate the value of outreach, whereas you can demonstrate the fact that you've got a puppy in a cozy bed.
Yeah, and I think this is because people's and it's interesting really in terms of animal experimentation that when the 20 beagles, well, I think it turned out to be 18, didn't it, were rescued from MBR Acres going back a couple of years ago, 3 years ago or whatever, just had the trials in connection with it. There's a big celebration. Is it marvelous these beagles have been rescued, etc., etc., etc. Talking about 18 dogs, and yet the past 3 years in the UK, figures have been published for animal experiments, and in the last 3 years, year upon year, the number of animal experiments has fallen in the UK. A number of animal experiments annually now in the UK, according to official figures, is 400,000 fewer animals a year than in 2021. But no one has celebrated that. No one has celebrated that. And when the figures came out every year saying, oh, there's been a reduction in the number of experiments, no one has celebrated that. And yet if someone, rescues, takes 20 out of place, there's big celebrations. And kind of why is that? And I think that's an indication of kind of how people's minds work.
But you can't blame them though, can you, Ronnie?
It's it's just how the human mind tends to work, and sometimes we can kind of use it. Like this Animal Aid produced some leaflets some while ago, and there was like they did one called This Little Calf, and they did another one called This Little Chick. And what it was about, it focused just on the life of like a single calf and what happened to that calf. And in the case of the chick, what happened to that single animal. And I thought that was clever because I think people can relate that to that kind of. And then it went on, after talking about the individual animal, to talk about, the numbers that are killed and et cetera, and, encouraging people to become vegan. And I thought that was a clever approach to it, because because people are much easier for people to relate to that individual animal than just to like some huge figure of the totality of animals that are exploited and killed. And so perhaps we ought to start thinking about, well, kind of how do we kind of use this trait in people to kind of be more concerned about kind of individuals as small numbers of more identifiable animals than about the huge kind of
there's lots of kind of demonstrations of it in the sense that if people see a close sign on an animal use place, then that's a tangible thing that they're looking at.
Yes.
And so we've always got that intangibility of vegan outreach, because you're planting a seed and then that seed walks away from you. You don't know.
And you very rarely, but we do know in general terms that it kind of works, don't we? You do know that everyone that's become vegan has become vegan because they received information in one form or another. And that information.
We do know that the vegan population is pretty static, don't we?
Well, certainly there are far more, the percentage, I mean, certainly here in UK, a percentage of people that are vegan is a lot greater now than it was some years ago. So obviously there's been something that has, people
well,
identify
let
as
me
vegan.
ask you a really, really difficult question that you won't be able to answer, which is
Right.
we've had a rise of the amount of vegans. What percentage of those vegans actually know what veganism is?
Oh, a minority, I would say. It's going to be a minority, but then that's, you know, that's where InReach comes in, doesn't it? You know, educating people who identify as vegans about what veganism really means and what veganism really implies.
Yeah, and the ironic thing is, as you said, that if you try to mention it, you get shut down or even banned from things because
With some, I mean, I was banned from a group, a vegan group on WhatsApp for trying to explain what veganism actually was. Didn't like it because they, you know, their idea was it was a diet. Didn't like it that it tried to explain about it being a philosophy. So that will happen. Even though I was really polite, I didn't, you know, I didn't kind of shout and scream and stuff. You know, that can happen. But
well, you can't be a real vegan then, can you, Ronnie? If you're not screaming, you didn't screaming each of their faces, no.
No,
No,
but
well,
it doesn't.
you're not a real vegan, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that, you know, that will happen. But what else can we do? You know, what else can we do? Just got to keep on keeping on, haven't we? Really.
Well, we've still got 35 people with us, so thank you very much for all of that.
Yes, that's great. We've got that number
We've
actually.
got more people than we have when we announced.
Well, because it was a fairly impromptu thing. It's, you know, was quickly, you know, there wasn't a lot of notice. I'm really pleased we've got that number actually. That's great.
Well, you've been called the vegan police, Ronnie.
I don't think anyone said that, but they kind of might have thought it. We've
got some nice vegan police badges.
Kind of what it was just that I was just gently pointing out that veganism was a philosophy.
You're a purist, Ronnie.
Yeah. I've been called far worse things than a purist.
Yeah, by me. So
yes. Especially by you, probably.
Right, people. I think we should say thank you very much to everyone and say goodbye. We've been on for 2 3/4 hours, so that's
wow. Past my bedtime now.
Is it? Yeah.
Not really, no. But right, it's coming
people,
up. Yeah.
And I say thanks very much and see you again.
Yeah. Take care, everyone. Bye.